Hey, everybody, we're going to be getting started just momentarily. We'll give it a little bit of a minute here to let everybody get logged in and get rolling. And we may or may not have, probably will have Grandmaster Jeff Smith and Bob Dunn joining us here. As we're letting everybody get logged in, let me suggest a couple things. If you have any questions whatsoever, on topic or off topic, and I'm going to be pretty good, I think, at ignoring off topic and continuing on our focus here. But any questions at all, there's a Q&A box here and there's a chat box. Just jump into the Q&A box and put any question you have whatsoever. Um, we would I always prefer to have these things completely interactive, but since we're on a webinar format here, just jump into the Q&A box and any and all questions you have, jump in, fill them out, and go from there. Let's start with this, and I'm going to go at a little different tact here for just a second. And I know a lot of people who are in the meeting. There's probably a number of you that I've never met before, or maybe a few of you that we've met and I don't remember, and if so, I apologize. But let me start with this. Everybody that I know who are participating today and that I've seen on the registration list, I'm assuming that, and many of you I know, I'm assuming that you're a martial artist with a lot of background credentials. You've been at this for a long time. I'm hoping that you know your art extremely well. Perhaps at one time or perhaps currently, you were an excellent athlete when it comes to martial arts. And that's not unusual. There certainly are what the industry likes to call McDojos or one thing or another. But what I find typically happens with that language is not that there are people in the industry who are not credible. What it is more often is the broke people use that as an excuse, to throw stones at schools who are doing better than they are. And again, we all know that there are, blue belts who proclaim themselves third degree black belts, and there's first degree black belts who proclaim themselves, master instructors, and there's also the occasional. Back when I was in Washington D.C., we used to refer to it as, um, the Koreans promoting themselves on the way over on the boat. They'd leave Korea as a first degree and get there as a fourth degree, looking for a job teaching. Um, but we know that there is that in the industry. But what is more common are longtime martial artists who have really spent a lot of time mastering their art. Maybe they've developed a high level of athletic competency. Of course, that wanes as you grow older. Unfortunately, even my instructor, Grandmaster Jun Rhee, well into his 70s, was fit and capable, but it always wanes. But what is very rare is for somebody to sit you down and before you open your martial arts school say, look, your athletic accomplishments aren't enough and your knowledge of the physical skills aren't enough. You've got to be really good at marketing your business. You've got to be really good at the sales conversion process with your business. You've got to be really good next at creating and developing staff and moving people up. You've got to understand price points, and you can't set price points just by, calling around the other schools in the area and picking a midpoint. That's not a very productive way to go about it. So what we know is pretty much everybody who's on this meeting, almost everybody I talked to, did not have the experience that I had before I opened my schools. And my experience before I opened my schools was I sat down and I had to talk with Jeff Smith, who was the vice president of the Jun Rhee Institute, head instructor, with Nick Kokinas, who was the owner operator of Educational Funding Company, which at the time was an internal arm of the Jun Rhee Institute, doing their student billing, and Nick was a consultant for Jun Rhee and Jun Rhee. And I had the opportunity to sit down with all three of them and said, what should I know that I don't know? Jun Rhee was nice enough to let me go through the file cabinets and one thing or another. And then Ned Muffley, who ended up working later for Nick Kokinas as general manager, he let me go through the file cabinets on his new opening. And they all said the same thing. They said, you've got to understand the marketing. You've got to understand the sales process. You've got to understand pricing and structure. Ultimately, you're going to have to understand developing staff. and you're going to have to understand curriculum design and development. The term is teaching pedagogy. You're going to have to understand how all that works, especially as you scale in order to do that well. So what we get almost exclusively are school owners who say, I'm a great instructor. I've got great credentials. My students love me. But if I just had more students, everything would be solved. And I think that's a lie in almost all cases. But it is true that very few martial artists know much, if anything, about how to market effectively. And in today's day and age, it's gotten even worse because there's this bozo explosion of now agencies, and sometimes they don't present themselves as agencies, but it is what they are. Is they're buying Facebook ads or Instagram ads or other social media, or they're, doing SEO or buying clicks, and their pitch is, we'll get you all the students you need. You just be an instructor, and we'll send all the students that you need your way. Well, that doesn't work. One is what we know on the marketing is you can't rely just on online marketing to feed all your traffic. Number two is some of them even go to the point of saying, we'll make the appointment for you, and then you do it from there. What I know, because I talk to many of them behind the scenes, they approach us to help support their clients, because what happens when their clients, um, the reason the agencies come to us is their clients blame them at the point where they hand it off. In other words, if they say, we'll make an appointment for you, then the appointments don't show up or they don't close the sales. So there is no magic pill, and there is no agency that's going to solve your need to understand the marketing structure and framework, to have what I call the Parthenon. That's why I have the facade of Wall Street back there, all the pillars of the marketing activity going on. If there's not going to be a agency that's going to solve all of that for you. The other element of that is that you have to become, you have to go from being a good athlete, a good martial artist, knowledge of the martial arts. You've got to become a good master teacher. But even there in our industry, the definition of what a good master teacher is oftentimes not very well defined. And what my argument would be is a great master teacher is one that keeps students for a long period of time training, motivates them to want to continue to train, that develops a high percentage of people who start with the school that graduates to black belt. And in other educational settings, if we look at colleges, one of the ways that we differentiate good colleges from bad colleges is, what's the graduation rate? What percentage of people who enter as a freshman end up graduating with their degree? The way we evaluate how a good high school or a good school system is, what percentage graduate with their high school degree, and what is the quality? Can they read and write and do arithmetic, or are they just being handed the degree, is certainly one criteria. But if a low graduation rate is there, then they're not particularly good at educating the kids. And the same is true with martial arts schools. I've had belligerent martial artists stand up in front of me and say, "All of my students are great. I have great students, one thing or another." But then when you get underneath it, what you find is that most of their students never get past. Um, let's see, I've got some kind of error message coming up on here, so apologize for a second here. Well, I will just ignore that. Hopefully, it doesn't affect anything. But what they find is that what I was going to say is, I find with these people is mostly their students all drop out at gold belt or green belt. So most of their students, far from being excellent, most of their students end up sucking. They end up at a very low level rather than at a super high level. Because if most of the students you enroll drop out at gold or green belt, and a school is dropping out 7% a month, I mean, just statistically, most people aren't getting through the first year, and very few people are getting to black belt from there. So that's what I find. But anyway, I just wanted to do a little rant to start with, and to share that. I'm going to get very specifically here into some of the opportunities that are coming up. One of course is Karate Kid, and it's coming up. We're now at May 1st. It's coming up at the end of May. So let me share this and uh, show a few specific things that we can work on here. And I'm going to share my screen with everybody, and hopefully this works for us here. Apol- Apologize if I'm not great with this. I don't use PowerPoint much at all. In fact, I kind of despise it. So let's see. Let's do this, and let's get kind of aggressively into Karate Kid opportunities. And what I'm again going to say is it's understandable most of you aren't particularly good at marketing. And the thing to disabuse yourself of is that there's one magic pill that never works. There is no one thing. In fact, if there is one thing, the one thing very often goes away pretty quickly. So, I've had periods over the year where if I just relied on TV advertising, I would have been great and did lots of 30-second spots and long form, meaning infomercials, and it did great. Other times when, for many years, I used page three of the TV guide in our Sunday newspapers, both of which had circulations in the range of 8 to 900,000. That worked great. Now, one of those newspapers is now out of business. The other one is a shadow of its former self, and neither one have a TV guide anymore. So, and TV has changed dramatically. If you're not aware, which you probably are, hell, I'm not sure I even have live TV that comes into the home anymore. Pretty much everything I watch is streaming, Paramount Plus, Apple TV, Netflix, or YouTube. So all of that has changed. So once you get one thing that works, if you're relying on one thing, it's a huge mistake. And I'm going to skip over some of this stuff. We've got a heck of a team here. If you don't know my background, I've been owning and operating schools well over 40 years. I worked my way through college working for the Junri Institute, and then started my own Mile High Karate schools in 1983. Opened 5 schools in 18 months, 6 schools in 30 months, and ended up on today's equivalent about a $5 million operation by the time I was 25. My associate's Jeff Smith. He was former world light heavyweight kickboxing champion. More importantly, he's been running schools longer than I have actually. Each of us have done over 100 million in revenue through our own schools. Um, and in the context of said nicely on the page here, this stuff works. I say it more blatantly, this shit works. We've got any number of schools now that are in the $1 million a year plus range. I just got off our meeting on 2 days ago on Tuesday with our $1 million schools, and many of them will have their best summer ever this summer. Many of them were at 100, 120,000 a month for, or will close April at 100, 120,000 a month. Many of them were 3 to 400,000 in their first quarter. So we have many, 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 many schools. Uh, Here's an example of Scott Sullivan on the left, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu School in Houston. When he started with us, he was doing 24,000 a month. That last month they did, I think, 120,000. Riley, it's up in Canada. He went from 6,000 a month to the mid 50s, all within about 5 or 6 months. So um, there's Ben Brown. He went from 16,000 to over 60 in less than 6 months. He's now in the 80s. Tim Harrison, when he started with us, he was in the teens, and now he's very consistently between 95 and 120,000 a month. Um, um, this is Stephen D. Castillo. He's in Tampa, Krav Maga school there. He started with us in COVID. He had gone from about 30,000 to about 18,000 a month. And now he opened his second school, but his primary school is consistently 60, 70, and sometimes as high as 90. And then the new school is dramatically up and running. And to disabuse everybody of the idea that June, July, and August is in um, a slow time, we've been having our schools have that be our busiest period of time for marketing, and especially this summer with Karate Kid and all the other activities coming up, it is just a great time to fill your school up. So, um, um, far from it being a slow time or a hard time to do enrollments, summer typically should be busy time. And by the way, you shouldn't have a revenue drop either. That's a different conversation. But I'm gonna move on. Is getting into the Karate Kid thing. The first thing I want to share, and I haven't been too generous about the way I phrase this, but most of the consultants, coaches, one thing or another, running around the industry are kind of in the bozo explosion. And what I mean by that is they're either a one-trick pony, so they have, again, the agencies have one good ad set or two good ad sets they can do. All of a sudden they're impressive for a month or 2 months or 3 months. Um, there's a couple of others in the industry that I still joke that I got into coaching and consulting to save people from because they were really good at teaching people to cash everybody out and not good at teaching people how to keep students, make them happy, or have long-term retention. But what you want to do is you want to have all of the pieces put together. You want to have the pricing program structure put together, the sales processes in place, and then open the floodgates. And May is going to be the best time that in recent memories to open the floodgates, followed by June and July. So you want to have all those pieces put together and not rely on one magic pill or one trick pony. You want to have all the pieces put together. Um, Before we go any further, I want to make sure that I again point out any questions that you have, put them in the Q&A box there. I do find that many martial arts school owners, many instructors seem to be afraid to ask questions. That they have a hard time jumping in, and they for whatever reason have questions when we're done, but they don't ask the questions in the middle. So ask any and all questions. And there's my associate Bob Dunn's phone number. I'm going to talk to you about a program we're doing that goes for 6 weeks to follow up from that as we go. So you might jot the phone number down, 720-256-0208. But in the meantime, fill in the Q&A box there. Any questions you have, just jump in, ask those questions, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to pull off the PowerPoint there for now, and let me check and see if Bob has managed to pop in. I know Master Smith wasn't going to be able to join us. No, it looks like he hasn't popped in either, and that's fine. So let's start with Karate Kid and the opportunities with Karate Kid. I did a great conversation with Ali Abarigo and Dwayne Brummett a couple days ago. We pulled it together at the last minute. We shared, I think it was middle of last week. Um, but one of the things that we talked about is the evolution of this and going all the way. Hey, there's Bob. There's Bob. I was just looking for you, Bob. Uh,
I was stuck backstage, so I was able to figure out how to get out of there.
you got to tell it to interstage.
You had
Leave
to,
backstage.
I thought it was an invitation. I thought I was waiting.
Interstage right or something like
I
that. No,
saw that. Yeah, I thought you had to invite me in, but anyways,
yeah. For being the most technologically advanced group in the world here, I think
ah,
we have difficulty with Zoom meetings and webinars from time to time. But where I was going with that, Bob, is I had that conversation with Ali and Dwayne. One of the things that we got into a little bit was the history of these movie theater promotions, and um, I kind of stumbled into the recollection, but when I was opening my schools to begin with, was right in the middle of when the first Karate Kid came out, and having had the long conversations with Junri and Nick Okinis and Jeff Smith and Ned Muffley about things I needed to do to be successful out here, one of the things that had come up was what they had done with Enter the Dragon back in the day, and of course Junri was close friends with Bruce Lee, as was Jeff Smith. Um, and sadly, Bruce Lee had died before Enter the Dragon was released. But I had heard all the things they did with that, and then I got a chance to see a preview screening of the first Karate Kid, and immediately recognized that I didn't know if it was going to be a hit or not, but I did know that it was going to be productive for us if it was a hit. So what we found is again, but where Karate Kid happened was I had opened 3 locations. My third location had just opened, and then I ended up opening 3 other locations right behind it. So I had mentioned 5 schools in 18 months, 6 schools in 30 months. Those last 3 schools are right on the heels of the first Karate Kid movie. And I had gone from literally 0 to 3,500 students in the period of about 36 months once the sixth school was up and running. And much of that momentum in the last 3 schools was off the Karate Kid movie. And Bob, the stories I use about pricing, where we had 2,400 square feet and 680 plus or minus students, was on the heels of the original Karate Kid and promoting with that. So what you should do right now is, and again, my warning for everybody is most everybody who's on the meeting here, if you're not working with us already, and most of you aren't, um, you are all in all likelihood need a lot of work on your pricing, your program structure, and your new enrollment process. But you also, if we put all these pieces together for you and feed in 200 intros in a month or so, what's going to happen is your systems are going to get overwhelmed and break. And Bob, wouldn't you say it's fair to say almost everybody we talk to says, well, everybody I talk to, they enroll. My students love me, they stay forever. I just need more of them coming in the door. And then when we open the floodgate, guess what happens? Is their lead conversion goes to hell, their intro flow goes to hell, they get overwhelmed and they never get around to talking to anybody, or their closing rate overall goes to hell. And so what we do fix for schools is what they're pricing, how they're structuring it, the ability to stress test the sales process so you can handle a large flow of people. But then the other thing is opening the floodgates and getting more intro flow in a week than most people get in a month, get more intro flow in a month than most people get sometimes in a year. So but that will be the point of this whole Karate Kid thing, but it's also going to be the point of everything else we're going to show you how to do in July, August, and September. Um, Bob, anything to add to any of that before I move forward?
No, I think it's fair to understand what you just said about the leads coming in and the flow of intros that you can be doing. Because as you mentioned, most that I talk to, I mean, the sales that they're doing are pretty much laydowns, right? So they're either referral based, walk-ins, people that were looking for you. And I would say a norm would be maybe 30 leads a month,
Mhm.
tops with most of that I speak with, and then they're enrolling maybe, 5, 10 max. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity with this, but as you mentioned, I mean, the training that needs to coincide with being able to handle that type of influx of prospective students is important and for you to capitalize. So.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And let me go back to a basic marketing principle here. Um, and let me see if I can get my PowerPoint going again. Is a couple of key marketing principles here is the number one thing I like to do is what I think I stole this from Dan Kennedy called marketing in a vacuum. I don't want to be the guy who just is getting people who went and Googled martial arts schools and they called me and seven other people. Now, if somebody goes and Googles, I want to show up number one. I want to have a great site. I want to have all the reviews and everything. But I want to go market in a vacuum. In other words, I want to get to people before they're thinking about doing martial arts rather than go get to them once they're out looking. That's the way I avoid price shopping. It's the way that I end up with the highest closing rates and so forth. The second thing is I want to have a high lifetime revenue per student. And what in polling our schools, and this was again our Tuesday meeting, but this is a couple of weeks ago. I did a sample of all the schools, and here's the rule of thumb basically is how many enrollments did you do how many enrollments did you do that last year, and divide them into how many what was your gross revenue last year. We're finding our average lifetime value of a student between 8 and 9 thousand or more per student. In other words, when we enroll a student, we know they're likely to spend between 8 and 9 or even more $1,000 in the school. And most schools I talk to are more like $2,000. So it makes a huge difference in your marketing approach if you know the average student is going to be very valuable versus they're not going to be valuable. And one of the keys is long-term retention, long-term student quality, and the other is program structure, having a good renewal system in place, and so forth. The other thing is the only way to ensure yourself, long-term success with this stuff is to make sure that you really are in good shape with, again, a term I think I stole it from Jay Abraham, but the Parthenon. It's what I did when I opened my schools to begin with, and it's what I had modeled, seeing June Reed do back in the 70s and 80s. But make sure that you have a ton of stuff going on every month. Our rule of thumb is twofold: have 20 things going on every month to drive traffic to your school, and that includes with the Karate Kid stuff coming up. Make sure you have 20 things going on every month. In fact, for May and June, I would probably double that. Um, and the complaint that I get is, well, I just don't have time to do that. That's a staffing or a time management issue, and usually it's a staffing issue. And number two, the complaint that I get is that people just you usually, Bob, wouldn't you say it's in the form of, I heard somebody say to do X, I tried that, it didn't work. And when somebody's tried something that didn't work, oftentimes they were just missing one or two key tactics of the strategy in order to get it to work. And my best example is the whole school talks thing. That came from my PE teacher for the day way back in the 80s. But when it got replicated out, they missed the key component that made it work. And so, I would go to a school and I would teach 500 kids. I'd get contact information, name, address, phone number, and on 400 of those, half of them would have checked that they wanted to be contacted immediately for an introductory process, and it would be a gold mine. And other people are saying, "Well, I've tried school talks, and what they've done is they've gone to a classroom with 20 kids and gave them all guest passes and said, 'Hey, come down here Saturday.'" Well, of course it didn't work. And in fact, you put enough effort into it that you got tired and you got enough results that you were reluctant to give it up. But I'm going to skip a couple of things here and go here. But this is what I mean by the Parthenon is really what we want to do is have a bunch of different things going on at once. We're thinking in terms of roughly a third of your student traffic should come from online, roughly a third from internal referral activities and systems, and roughly a third from online external activities. And the exception of that is if you're a small school. And I think of critical mass as being about 100 students. But if you're at 2, 3, 400 students, you should be able to generate a lot of enrollments every month from internal referral systems, not from just teaching great classes and hoping that they'll bring their friends, but having legitimate systems that help students drive and bring their friends into the school and get them introduced to you in the school. That's what I mean by referral systems. But if you're a small school, you're at 40 students and you're trying to grow, you just don't have enough critical mass for that. So you're going to have to do an awful lot of other things to get going. Any thoughts on that, Bob, or anything, Dad?
No, sir. I mean, the only other thing I would, say to that, with a school that's growing slowly, what ends up happening is the retention becomes a factor, which most schools don't recognize that there is a challenge there, but in reality, it is. That's why when a lot of the schools that I speak with, when we crunch the numbers on how many were enrolled with, say, the previous year and how many they started with, it typically turns out to be the same.
Yeah, one of my favorite old Tom Cruise movies was Days of Thunder. And there's a great line in that movie where um, I forget. I think it's the old, the sage coach who's talking to the young doctor who was at. Um, I don't know if she's from Australia. Her name will come to me in a second. But it basically the conversation is you can't get race car drivers to go to the hospital. They don't want to recognize their own mortality. And it's the same with martial arts instructors. They don't they're so focused on the students who are in front of them, they forget about all the ones that used to be there. And the hardest thing to do is get them to go through the box of everybody who dropped out. The hardest thing I ever had to do was get the instructors to go call people who've been gone a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and to get them back in because they don't want to recognize that people didn't love them. And our rule of thumb for that, by the way, our benchmark is less than 2%. So if you have 300 students, we wouldn't want to have to enroll more than if 300 students, it'd be 6 people a month to stay even, right? So if you have 500 students, that would mean you'd need 10 a month to stay even. If you had 1,000 students, that would mean, um, what is that quick, Bob? That'd be 20 students a month to stay even. So Well, what happens is most schools are losing 7 to 10% a month. So I have 300 students and I need, 22 students to stay even. Or heck, my friends Tim and Dave Cover, they used to call it feeding the beast. They had one big school with 800 students and they had to have 50 or 60 people a month to stay even. And that's just a nightmare when you're having to do that. So what we want to do is we want to have the student value be super high. And again, I think in terms of every additional student you enroll is going to be worth about $9,000. You may not be, probably aren't there yet. If you're not there yet, that would be one of the things that we would help you develop, is to get that revenue up where it needs to be on a per student basis. But anyway, Bob, let's go back to the Karate Kid opportunities here. Is I think what kind of generates in the um, market out there is most people don't have a clue. Of course, they're not in the mode of even knowing that this is an opportunity, or they think they're going to sit around and Karate Kid's going to come out and all of a sudden it's going to drive traffic to their school. Um, and so, but what happens is what we want to do is we want to get out and take advantage of every opportunity to feed. Again, going back to that Parthenon idea, we want to have everything that we can do in order to drive traffic into the school. Um, and again, even pretty sharp people, some friends of mine, they think, well, the one thing I need to do with Karate Kid is I go set up a booth in the local movie theater. Well, yeah, I mean, that's great. You've got to have the scripting right. You've got to have all the pieces right with it and have the ability to make that work. But there's a lot more to it than that. Bob, did I get the right screen here?
I don't see a screen up. Oh, it just changed.
Okay.
Is it?
Okay. So let me again. I'm fumbling with PowerPoint, and you know that I hate PowerPoint generally, but we'll we'll go back to this one. Let me give you some actual results. Last time Karate Kid came around, uh, Jeff Smith School did 157 enrollments in 8 weeks. And then we were talking about it more thoroughly. They actually had 400 intros and got overwhelmed with traffic. Rick Petito down in Dallas did 850 leads in 2 weekends, um, again in Dallas. We had, this is Ken Gibson. He's in Harlem. He did over 250 intros in a week and a half there from working with their local AMC theater. And what again people are constantly kind of saying is that this stuff doesn't work, but it works great. You just got to work the system. And so what we're going to do is show you really the system and the process for doing that. And so here would be some of the things that we want to work on. We want to have in theater promotions. So we want to do all kinds of things with theater promotions. Bob, is the right screen showing here? Aspects for effective promotions.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. My my desktop in its infinite wisdom has PowerPoint open 3 times now.
Uh-oh.
It's fascinating. Um, but anyway, we want to have all of this tied into all the social media that you're doing, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, everything else. Um, we want to have internal referral events. So we want to have every excuse in the world tied into this to have people bring their students. And some people default to, oh yeah, I'm going to rent a movie theater and bring everybody. And absolutely, that's a great process. Last Karate Kid movie that came out, we did word of mouth screenings. I think we did 8 or 10 different ones across the metro area where we had free tickets to preview word of mouth screenings that all were happening a week to 2 weeks before the actual movie came out, and we used those as tremendous referral events. But you can also do it opening weekend the following week. You can rent the theater and bring your friends. It's a great way to, in that case, build rapport with the movie theater, and it is a useful referral event. But that's not mostly not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about internal events to your school. tie it into outreach with local elementary and middle schools, tie it into other guerrilla or grassroots marketing in your area, and tie it in with other live event marketing in your area. So what we're always looking to do here is create a booth. This was one of our Mile High Karate schools. This is Colby in Mankato, Minnesota. Um, but we're always looking to do is create a reason for people to come to the booth, create a mechanism, scripting for how to get them to get to the booth, scripting for, in this case, you see a prize wheel. So they spin the wheel, they win a prize. We have the scripting to schedule an appointment once they've done that, and then the scripting to, and this was a trade show, not a movie theater, but it's the same basic idea. So having the scripting to do all of that, and then the number one objection you get is I need to go check with wife, husband, soccer schedule, work schedule, one thing or another, and then how the scripting to do that. So to give you an idea of at a movie theater booth or any live event booth, but at a movie theater booth, what we're seeing is if I got 100 leads, in other words, they filled out name, address, and phone number, what we're getting typically is as many as 90% make an appointment on the spot. How? Because sometimes it's 100%. And so the mistake number one is not to make appointments on the spot just to capture leads. And here's what I see. And Bob, I've talked about that here in the Denver metro area. I started doing this literally 40 years ago in the metro area. And you would have thought that every other martial arts school in the area would have, caught the drift of what I was doing in elementary schools. Maybe they couldn't do the TV infomercial newspaper advertising because my gross was, probably 50 times higher than any one of them. But they could have figured out what I was doing in the elementary schools and went and duplicated that. They could have figured out what I was doing in the movie theaters and went and duplicated that. And in 40 years' time, I've only seen two other schools ever even do a booth in a movie theater, as an example. And both of them screwed it up massively. My son and I, at least, he turned 17. Now he's off with his friends in his Jeep. But, we used to go to a lot of movies together. And before that, my daughter, before she grew up. But twice I saw martial arts schools do it and managed to walk in and watch them. And, in both cases, they had a high school or college kid sitting behind the booth, putzing with his iPhone, waiting for somebody to come up to talk to him, right? Well, if you're at any booth and you're sitting behind the booth, you lost the battle already. And if you're sitting there playing with your phone, nobody's going to come up and talk to you. And if you don't have a reason for them to come up to the booth, hence something like the prize wheel, you've lost the battle. Um, and then even in Sterling, I mentioned Jeff Smith's numbers. He had one of those weekends where, there was a mistake and they had rented a booth to some other martial arts school, and it was actually his school and another martial arts school. They made 100 appointments that weekend, and watched the other guy who just sat behind the desk. And if somebody came up and asked him something, he gave him a flyer. Well, Bob, what happens if you give somebody a flyer at an event like that? One is most of the flyers end up in the movie theater. They never get home. Two is if it goes in their pocket or goes in the purse, it never gets looked at again. And they very rarely contact you. But if you got name, address, and phone number, and then you've made an appointment, you have the ability to email them, to text them, to do live outbound call, to leave a message on their voicemail, to mail them physically stuff in the mail. You have the ability to follow up in all of those mechanisms. So what I see so many times is people muck it up. They muck up the process. So, as far as with Karate Kid, number one is going to be get into the movie theater, and sometimes it's as easy as pick up the phone. There's a couple of major agencies that handle this for our members. We have it in our discussion forum and contacts and so forth. But sometimes it's as easy as that. Other times it uh, merits building relationship with the movie theater, showing them, Zig Ziglar used to call it WIIFM, what's in it for them, showing them what's in it for them, for you to help them promote their business and that, this movie in particular, but showing them what's in it for them. But if you can build a relationship in the theater, you get in front of all of their traffic coming in. And um, and by the way, it doesn't necessarily have to be a Karate Kid, although this is a marvelously pre-qualified group of people who are going to be coming to the movie. But you have to be in a big theater with a lot of traffic in a weekend that there's going to be something that's going to draw traffic. My assumption is that Karate Kid Legends is going to be big. The early tracking numbers for the industry are good. It's not like the Disney movies that have, kind of screwed up over the past. I think they're projecting a $50 million opening weekend or something like that, which is pretty good. Um, but you've got to create that, and that gets you in front of the traffic. But then you have to think of what else can I do? What are all of the other things that I can do that are going to generate traffic? Well, I can use the hoopla around that to get into all my local elementary and middle schools, private schools, charter schools, public schools. We have scripting for that. We talk about that on our Wednesday marketing meetings. You can use that to get out and do all of the grassroots marketing, or I call it guerrilla marketing, where you're out there with everything from rack cars to bandit signs to banners to blow up figures to you've got Domino's and Pizza Hut and Papa John's putting flyers on the boxes going out. You've got McDonald's putting flyers in there, takeout window, Chick-fil-A, Burger King, all of the major fast food. I've done tray liners and things in the bags. All of that kind of stuff is stuff that can be tied into the Karate Kid. I mentioned 5 or 6 times already, but you can do internal referral events, assuming you have critical mass. If you're, over 100 students, but especially if you're 300, 500, 600, 800 students, you should make hay with this. So, that's again why I did all those preview screenings and made a big deal about that and external, but we also did a bunch of internal things and internal, themed days and themed buddy days and themed events that were all tied into Karate Kid, just like we did some for May the 4th and with the anniversary with some of the Star Wars movies. So there's all kinds of things that you can do internal to drive traffic. And then you want to theme everything you're doing for a couple of months here, and we've got artwork and all that kind of stuff. But you want to theme everything you're doing, whether it be your social media marketing, your direct mail, um, um, all of that. You want to theme it with all the martial arts theme, but the Karate Kid theme along with it. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to take a breath here and ask if anybody has any questions, and then we can kind of go from there. No?
Been a little quiet today, sir. Yeah. Let me see.
Yeah, we were loaded with questions last week, and um, I've been kind of flooded with questions the last couple of days too. So I'm going to go ahead and answer those in case they're too shy to answer them themselves. Bob, what I got 5 or 6 times in the last couple of days from people is small schools who have hit a plateau. One school had hit a plateau of 87 students. Another school hit a plateau of like 70 students. In fact, I have some notes on some of the questions people are asking about it. But schools that had hit a plateau and they just were trying to figure out how to, get off of the plateau. And, my answer to that, and always sounds kind of trite, but my answer is there's no problem at all in a martial arts school that 100 new students won't fix. And so if you truly spent the next 6 weeks to put all the pieces in place to add a net 100 students to your school, and you mentioned it again in a different way, Bob, growing slow, attrition kicks in and kicks you in the ass. So what we see a lot of times is schools who are adding 10 students a month and they're losing 10 students a month, and they're like a hamster on the wheel and they're never making any progress, right? But if you did everything in the world that you can do in the next 6 weeks to add 100 students to your school, let's say that you legitimately had 100 new students in June, maybe another 100 new students in July. That's going to kick you off of any damn plateau that you might be on. And we can definitely do that. We were talking to Brandy and Scott on Tuesday. Wasn't last summer, it was 2 summers ago, but they got ahead of steam and did a bunch of stuff at July 4th, and they enrolled 112 students in 4 weeks right after that. So it was in a 4 week period, week 2 of July through week 1 of August. They did 112 new students. The example I used of Sterling was 152 with the first Karate Kid movie. So there's nothing that gets you off a plateau like having a big blitz all at once. And by the way, again, I hate to say it because a lot of people are on the meeting looking for a magic pill, but there is no magic pill, right? You've got to do a bunch of stuff. Nobody ever got rich sitting on their ass. One of the things that I learned from June Rhee is he was constantly hustling to generate publicity, and he was constantly hustling to get in front of large audiences. So we were out at the Redskins football halftime and doing media interviews with the coach of the Redskins, doing media events with congressmen and senators because he was the coach. We had the Republicans versus the Democrat team competition that ended up getting worldwide media coverage. In fact, on CNN headline news, it was every 30 minutes, everywhere in the world for 24 hours. So he was a genius at generating publicity, but he was also a genius at getting in front of large crowds of people and constantly buying ads in the Washington Post and the Washington Times and then on ABC, CBS, NBC. Today's version of that is I can be constantly buying advertising on social media. Social media and Google are different from what TV was then because you really can't ramp it. You can't ramp it very fast. So I can't go throw a bunch of money at social media and Google and add 100 students in 6 weeks. But all this kind of stuff that we do, especially tied to the Karate Kid opening, you can do that. Bob, let's talk to him,
We got
and then we'll about the this. Were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
we had a couple of questions here, sir.
Yeah, yeah.
So the first one, Brandon Gross, how often do you visit schools? Question mark. Are they regular visits or occasional fairs?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I believe he's referring back to your previous conversation about getting into the public school system.
Right. Oh,
So
okay. Okay.
how often do you visit the schools, and are they regular visits or occasional fairs? Maybe an occasional event, I guess you'd say.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, there's a long answer to a short question there. Let, let me encourage everybody to ask any questions you want. We have this scheduled for about an hour. As usual, I have about 8 hours worth of material prepared. Haven't even touched the surface on some of the things I prepared, and I will try to get to as much as humanly possible. But what I will guarantee is we'll answer any and all questions that get answered, and probably give you a longer answer than you were expecting. Let me touch base on one thing though very quickly is uh, Bob, let's share this with everybody really quickly. And we have this 6-week program I mentioned. And the reason we did it, frankly, was to give people a little introduction to what we do. And for smaller schools who perhaps weren't, at the point where they could do our full coaching process, to give them a jump start where they could do 100 new students in a very short period of time. And again, it's no magic pill. It's not like we're going to, deliver them to you on a silver platter. We're going to teach you all the components, including the school outreach to do that. But here are the components. One is we have a complete system where we have a complete course. It's a 6-week course on how to fill your school. We have a Q&A, including with our $1 million schools, but a Q&A opportunity to ask any and all questions about anything. Any of the meetings that we do or have done in the past, we record them, include the summaries and include the video recordings so you can go back and watch and review those things. But then the next piece of it is we get together every week in a small group format. In fact, this was our Tuesday meeting, but in a small group format, and it's completely interactive. So it's not, which I don't particularly like, Bob. We'll try to go to more interactive Zoom if we do this in the future. But what we do is we do fully interactive by Zoom every week, and have 6 modules that we go through. One of them is community outreach, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and so forth. One of them is social media and how to be really effective with that. One of them is online marketing, search, and so forth. Another one is live event marketing. Another one is internal referral marketing. And but you get the idea. Is we go through over a 6-week period of time and give you all the tools, strategies, and the actual tactics scripting, artwork, everything you need in order to add 100 new students to your school. And then the other element is we schedule a time one-on-one with Bob Dunn. And Bob, you've been coaching in martial arts schools for 20 years under my tutelage that I recall now. God, I think we've been working together that long. Um, I don't know about me, but you looked a lot younger when we started. Um, but 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 we set a time one-on-one with Bob Dunn, a time one-on-one with Grandmaster Jeff Smith, and a time one-on-one with me. And again, there's nothing off limits. Well, anything and everything you need to develop, but the primary focus is 6 weeks to add 100 students to your school. And then uh, so that's the three elements. There's courses and programs that are part of this. There's some bonuses, which are two very powerful referral systems. One is we call it the Ultimate Referral Machine. The other one is the Ambassador Program. Those are included for free. And then there's another program that we used to sell for $1,997 by itself called the Ultimate Fill Your School Program, which includes sales process, sales mechanism, pricing, but all the marketing techniques and other, as it says, it's the, ultimate how to fill your school program. And the thing that I'll point out, then we'll answer any and all questions here, is normally this whole program was $1,997. We decided to discount it in half as a ability to get some smaller schools to be able to jumpstart to $997. And then, Bob, I think what we concluded is, there are people who had been so burned by the Bozo explosion, or they had done stuff that they had tried that just didn't seem to work out for them. That we get a lot of people who are kind of skeptical of, oh yeah, well you're just going to tell me all the things that I know already, and there's nothing different. And so what we decided to do is create a 2-week, no obligation trial where you get to try out everything. You get to plug in with me, with Master Smith, with Bob Dunn. You get a chance to go through everything. You get a chance to talk to any of our clients, anybody you want one-on-one or in group format. Heck, Ben Brown came into our group meeting and said, "Hey guys, frankly, I think this is bullshit. Tell me, what your results have been." And we have him. In fact, we have that on tape, and we have him on tape going, "Yeah, I thought everything you were telling me was bullshit, and now I'm doing 85,000 a month, and everything you tell me to do works." So, but the structure of the thing is weekly on a small group basis, interactive, 60 to 90 minutes. Not this format, but completely interactive, individual one-on-one coaching to help you jumpstart, and all of the courses, the bonuses, everything else. But Bob, what I was saying about the skepticism thing is what we decided to try, and it's not an ongoing offer. If you want to do this, we thought we'd have a web page where you could register today. I haven't seen that working. Have you, Bob? But
Yes, sir. Merrick has it working. Well, it allows them to do the down payment. So that's
okay.
working right now. So,
Okay, if that's working, great. If not, they can call you. But what you would need to do is call Bob, 720-256-0208. Today only, we'll let you just do $97. Get started in the program for the first 2 weeks. Love it or hate it. If you love it, then you can pay the balance over a week on weekly basis, 175 a week. If you hate it, that's fine. Just let us know. No hard feelings. Bail out. Heck, if you want to pay $97 and suck everything you can out of 2 weeks and then bail, you're going to be your loss. But feel free to do that. But it's no obligation, no criticism if you're not convinced that it's going to be great, and an opportunity to talk to anybody and everybody you want and to try it out from there. But that's today. So if you call Bob 720-256-0208, or if we get the website to work, again, I think we had managed to not get it to work last I knew. Yeah, if I try to pull it up on my browser, it doesn't come up.
okay.
Yeah, no, we don't have a way. You can go to Martial Arts Wealth /Karate Kid and register for the $997. But if you wanted to try out the $97 deal, you'd have to do it today before whenever Bob's dog crosses his leg and wants to go to the dog park. But you have to do it today before your classes start. But give Bob a call, 720-256-0208. Let's go back to questions. And again, ask any and all questions that you want. The question we were at before, that was Brandon. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
That was
Uh,
a question about martial arts schools. Not martial arts schools, about the local elementary schools. And here is the long answer to a short question is there's all kinds of things that you can do effectively with elementary, middle, and to a lesser extent high schools. I'm much more of a fan of elementary schools, and this is public schools, private schools, charter schools, Catholic schools, the range of schools. But the range of things are back to school days. So school's going to get out in a minute, but then they're going to have a back to school or orientation days. One of my schools, when I was there watching, did 85 appointments in 2 hours at a back to school night. We have one of our members, she's since retired, but she did, I think it was 500 appointments in 1 week from different schools on that. That's a very productive and effective way that would be coming in August or September, depending upon your school systems. My favorite was always the after school enrichment programs. I would go in and teach PE teacher for the day, get permission slips, and then use it to promote an after school enrichment program. The numbers on that were if there were 500 kids in the school, I would get 80% permission slips, but then I would get a third of them, not a third, I'm sorry, I'd get 20% would register for the after school program. So 500 kids would be 100, kids in the program. 300 kids would be 60 kids plus or minus in the school program. And the range was anywhere from 15% up to 27 or 30%, but the average was 20% across hundreds of these that we did. Um, and so then what we would do is we would enroll about a third of them. So if I got 500 kids in the school, 100 in the after school enrichment program, I would end up enrolling about a third or 33, 35 enrollments from the thing. And again, each enrollment is worth, for us anyway, is going to be about $9,000. So 35 enrollments times, tick under $10,000, that's a $300,000 program. So that's another process. The other is the PE teacher for the day, going in and teaching the PE classes, getting permission slips, following up on that. A third is anytime they do a carnival or a fair or one thing or another, getting yourself invited along. That just becomes a live event booth. The fourth is what I call children's hospital flyers, but you can do a fundraiser for them or a fundraiser for an external charity. And we typically did like $47 for 4 weeks, kind of like what became a Groupon offer, where we would do the offer. They would pass out the flyers. I was printing those flyers in lots of 100,000 at a time, and they would go out through the school mail and go to the individual schools. End of school is a perfect time to do something like that. They can go out at the end of the year. You can do passes and certificates that go out with kids for good grades or for good attendance, that type of thing. And I could go on and on and on, but those are some of the biggies: the back to school orientation, after school enrichment, PE teacher for the day, live event marketing, a fundraiser, co-marketing promotion. So hopefully that gives you something to work on. What I would not do is I would not become the martial arts instructor for a daycare or the martial arts instructor for a school and be there, once a week every week or twice a week every week and get paid by them. Um, I highly support and work with Kickstart, formerly Kick Drugs in America, Chuck Norris's program. That's what they do. They put a martial arts instructor into a middle school. It's a very effective program in underprivileged, high risk populations. They do external fundraising to fund it, and then they put the program in. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about as an effective community outreach and marketing tool. I don't want a part-time job. I don't want to hire an instructor that I'm going to put in and have them subcontracted with some other organization. I want to drive traffic. Um,
and real quick before we get into the other questions,
yeah, and young Lee had hopefully I've got that right. He had said the chat box. I think what it is um, they can't see the chat, but you can ask questions in the Q&A. So we're seeing anything and everything coming through the Q&A. So just open the Q&A and ask any question you want.
Yeah. And Master Oliver, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So Merrick contacted me. I just posted up in well the chat section.
They can't see the chat
I
box.
can't see that. The link does work. So it's 6weekstoday.com/offer.
Okay. So
Maybe I'll put that in my name.
here
box.
here 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 here's what it is right here. So, and again, we're not going to leave this up, but 6 weeks today. There's a phone number, or you can go directly to the website, 6weekstoday.com. There's QR code that should take you to that.
/offer. They need
What's
to
that?
put /offer.
Oh, 6 weeks today /offer.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Well, then don't use that QR code.
Yeah, 6weekstoday.com/offer.
Oh, okay. Okay. So 6 weeks today /offer. And if you can't get that to work, like I couldn't, just call Bob and he'll do it. Yeah, that does, Bob, that does work. That lets you do that. So, um, again, you can go to that. I want to answer these other questions though, so let's not
Sure.
get too far off. But again, 6 weeks today /offer, which I'm not sure we needed the /, but anyway, that gives you a chance to register for that 6 week program. Shows you what the basics are and the bonuses are. But then if you click here, it lets you just do the 97. And again, you will be able to cancel that in any additional payments in 2 weeks if you don't love it. And if you love it, then stay, and we'll bill you 175 a week. But here was the other question I was seeing is about down payments. And Bob, do you want to read those off?
Yes, sir. But where were you at? Down payments. Mr. Jesse Dwyer, if it's open, what is the opinion on down payments versus just flat monthly rate? I currently use 3 options for down payments.
Does he say what the 3 options are?
Does not, no, sir.
Okay. Yeah, Jesse, you might expand on that. I'm not sure what you mean by the 3 options. Here is what we're trying to accomplish. In answer to your question, and again, I tend to give long answers to short questions, but I want you to understand the foundation. My mission is to get, and he put something in there, Bob, but 199, 299, 399 down on a 1-year agreement. Okay. Here's 3 principles. Principle number 1 is I want to end up with enough revenue the minute somebody enrolls to pay for whatever marketing and advertising I did in order to get them into the school. An old friend of mine, this is a very old story. Greg Silva was harassing me about using an old story of him, which was 30 years old. And I said, well, I guess the older we get, the older our stories are. But an old friend of mine, Keith Hafner, I was intimate with both those operations, and I remember his numbers were at the time 110,000 gross a month, well over 50,000 a month net, including overpaying his 2 sons and his brother, and it was costing him 13,000 a month in advertising to generate 22 enrollments a month, and that wasn't really the right number because about half of his enrollments were coming from internal referral activities that were costing little or nothing. So in the reality, it was costing him $1,000 or $1,300 to generate a new student that was going to be worth $5,000 to $6,000. And again, that all of those numbers led to netting well over 600,000 a year, plus overpaying family members. So what I want to all that having been said is I want to accomplish paying for whatever it costs to get the enrollment. And one of the advantages that I had 40 years ago is I knew what a student was worth I knew how much money I could spend to get a student. I knew how to get to break even. And where none of my competitors is the way they thought about it, they wouldn't spend more than, a few $100s a month to generate students. I could spend, 10, $20,000 a month, even in, 1980s dollars, and knew I was going to be in good shape because of the results. So that's a long way of saying what we're typically doing is something like it's typically $800 to enroll. We give you a $400 discount if you finalize your enrollment today, so it's 400, and then the first month. So we're getting initially somewhere between $500 and $800 the day somebody enrolls, and then scheduling to do monthly tuition after that. That's not a paid in full on a trial enrollment, which I consider a trial enrollment to be 12 months. But there is another principle, which is what I see most people do, especially as their volume increases, is they make their sales process, their enrollment process, too complicated. And I want to keep it as simple as humanly possible. I don't want to get simpler than possible, but I want to keep it as simple as possible. So if you get somebody confused, the answer is they knew nothing. So I want to keep it as simple as humanly possible. So I don't give people a bunch of options. We normally do this. It's this if you finalize the enrollment today, and then we do this. I'm not going to do two or three, four options. I'm always doing an initial tuition to begin with. What I absolutely hate, which has been a bozo explosion thing, is it's a $47 intro, and that covers the first month. And if you love it, then the next month just start paying monthly. Um, to some extent, that's what we're doing on this 6 week deal to give you guys a chance to try it out. But for a normal martial arts student, what I want is somebody who's going to be there and train the black belt. I want to prep them smoothly along the process. I want to indoctrinate them smoothly through the process. And I know that some of the people who do our 6 week program will never qualify to work with us beyond that. That's okay. We want to give you a jump start. So, Jesse, that was a fairly comprehensive answer, I think. Marco had a question there too, Bob. What was that?
Yes, sir. And it kind of is in line with Young Lee. So Marco asked for the Karate Kid movie booth, what's more effective to get leads or set appointments on the spot? And then Young Lee had also asked, what do you do in the theater? So we kind of covered that in the beginning. I'm assuming they may have hopped on a little late, um, and that's why they're
Yeah, well,
asking that.
we can certainly cycle back to it. Here's the thing. Anytime I am face to face with somebody, what works the least is I set up a table and expect for them to come up and ask questions if they're interested. What works next to least is I get in front of a bunch of people and give them flyers, right? I give them passes with the tickets. I pass out flyers in the theater. I go to a big, community event and I give everybody a flyer. It's not that it doesn't work at all, it just doesn't work very well. The next thing is getting a contact information without getting the appointment. Now, I freely admit, when I started in the 80s, oftentimes we did events and we just passed out flyers. But I learned very quickly if I had their name and mailing address, I could follow up with them. So we started getting name and phone number. And back then, though, we could sit down on Sunday night and I could put a phone bank of people together and we would. I remember we did a big Boy Scout event and we probably had 12 people doing a phone blitz on Sunday night with literally leaf bags full of lead slips. But back then, we could get an 85 to 95% answer rate if you were calling people, after 6 o'clock at night, before, say, 9 o'clock. Nowadays, what we know is almost every number you're going to get's a mobile. The good thing is we can now email them, text them, leave voicemail, call them, and mail them, rather than back then it was just call or mail or both. But the bad thing is they don't answer their phone. So what you want to do is make an appointment on the spot, not wait to try to track them down and to chase them to make the appointment. But then what we want to do is we want to follow up through every mechanism possible. So we're always setting it up where they're immediately getting text message, email, voicemail, a live human being is following up. but we're also immediately kicking off sequential autoresponder. That just means that it's automatically timed out that they're going to get follow-up by direct mail, by text, by voicemail, by email. And the mistake on any of this stuff, and this is what happened in the internet age, is people defaulted to email. Well, my argument is that it went from you've just got mail movie and people are sitting there watching for the little mailbox thing to come up and and sitting in rapt attention to they're pissed off and annoyed when they have to go to their email box. Most a lot of it is getting spam blocked before it gets there. A lot of it isn't getting opened. Some of the open rates even on the systems are really they scrolled by it on their Apple phone. They didn't even open it. The click-through rates are low, so you get low open rates, you get low click-through rates, much different than direct mail, much different than text messaging. So what we always want to do is we want to use an all of the above approach: email, text, voicemail, voicemail drops, live person calling, and direct mail. And almost nobody does direct mail well or right, but you definitely should be doing direct mail and be doing it right. So Bob, we're going to be out of time in a minute, but uh, flood some other questions in there. There was some good ones, and again, going back to Jesse, I see an awful lot of martial arts instructors who have low self-esteem about what they're offering, right? Is they're afraid to ask for a reasonable tuition. They're afraid to really sit down and have somebody pay it. They kind of pussyfoot their way into getting the student enrolled. They get a high number of people who, don't make it through the introductory process and enroll. They get a high number of people who enroll and then fall apart. What we want to do is have super solid students. And, I concluded many years ago that, the way I was going to have super high quality students in a super high quality school is I was going to have to get really good at marketing. And what happens is if you have the ability on a dime to open a spigot and flood your school with new students, if somebody comes in and they're not a good fit, if they are an asshole or if they just are overall not a good fit in their behavior, if they're not a good fit in the way that the family operates, if they're not willing to cooperate with you, if they want to try to dictate how they're going to take advantage of your program, not how they're going to participate, then I want to be able to say, well, this just doesn't seem like a good fit, and here's some other alternatives, or here's something you can go do. And if you feel like you have to have every new student who stumbles through your door, you can't do that. And then if you try to take anybody who can fog a mirror, whose credit card clears, you're going to end up filling your school with the wrong people. Um, so any other questions, jump in here. And Bob, let's go through and answer some of the other questions we've been asked as well. So here's that. I got rid of the QR code, 6weekstoday.com/offer, or safer probably is go to just give Bob a call, 720-256-0208. Give him a call before the end of the day, before his dog has to go for his playtime, and then you'll be in good shape. Bob, the other question that I get a lot is we get people who, and this is true whether it's elementary schools or movie theaters or anything, is they make a tepid effort to get the thing to work and then they get rebuffed, right? Um, and what I will tell you is with each of these things, and it's the reason why in an hour we're not going to be able to cover it, but on our 6-week program we can give you the complete scripting and the process and the procedures. Is with each of these things there are 5 or 6 different strategies that you can use that are going to effectively get into the schools. One of our guys was telling me that AMC theaters, which was one of my big go-tos in the latter years anyway, um, they now have a national policy against selling tabling through the primary organization. Well, that's okay. Back when I did this with Karate Kid 1, Karate Kid 2, Karate Kid 3, Karate Kid 4, um, um, Ninja Turtles 1 and 2, I forget how many there were. There was the Power Rangers movie, and with all kinds of other movies. There wasn't any such thing as go rent a booth and do a tabling. You just had to build a relationship with the district managers and with the theater managers and show them what was in it for them. So we can walk you through how to do that. Andre down in Florida just did that with his local theater. He's got carte blanche. So, they let him do everybody's wearing uniforms in the school for opening weekends. They're doing passes with the tickets. Of course, most of the theaters don't actually sell tickets anymore. You come in with your Fandango, online purchase or whatever. But they're letting them do a booth. They're letting them do, banners in the theater. When I did it back in the day, they would give me free slides on the screen. Nowadays, it's video advertising, banners. I had one time I'm standing in one of the theaters and somebody came in and said, I didn't know you guys owned, movie theaters too. It's like, no, we don't own the theater. It just looks that way because all the all the movie poster holders had posters for our offer in all the movie poster holders outside the theater, in the shopping mall, in the theater. So there's all kinds of things that you can get them to do if you build a relationship. But then you want to tie it to everything else you do. So you want to tie it to your local community marketing. You want to tie it to all of the other marketing in your local area, and get a big hit on it. But I can absolutely guarantee you, if you plug in and follow the things that we're going to do in this 6-week program, you'll have everything you need to do to have, 100 students in July, or 100 students in a net added 100 students in June and July. All the pieces that you need to do that. Now you do have to get off your ass and go implement. But that is 100% totally in place.
Mm.
Up 5 or 6 other questions that we've gotten this week. We might as well go ahead and answer them for people as they're thinking of any last question before we have to ring off here in 3 minutes.
Yeah. Well, let me just circle back though on a 6 week program. I know there's a lot of excitement around the movie, but during a 6 week program, I don't know if you mentioned it, Master Oliver, but we're also going to be teaching everybody on there how to take advantage of there's an abundance of marketing opportunities during the summertime, and we'll be showing you exactly how to do that and how to and get involved in your community to do some other extensive marketing.
Yeah,
You
it's certainly not a slow period of time. It should be your busiest period.
And
Uh,
William,
but
I was going to say William Wong too. You had mentioned Andre, but we have two members. William also out there, let's see, California. He also got is that theater is also suiting up all of their staff members with his uniforms as well for the opening weekend.
Yeah, and
So
I believe Stephen D. Castillo has 2 theaters,
three of
or
them.
3 theaters down in Tampa that they've got all of those pieces put together. But
Yeah.
yeah, here's the components are the courses and the discussion, the interactive every week. And again, it's not this format, it's a live Zoom. But we're going to walk through all the different pieces: social media, online, guerrilla marketing, the Karate Kid marketing, all of the pieces. And then we're doing this in digital form now. Um, um, this is shown on DVD and CD, but this is the complete Fill Your School program, what it would be printed physically, the ambassador program and the referral machine program. All of that is huge. And again, for anybody skeptical, the only commitment really is $97 and then show up next Wednesday. We're going to be next Wednesday at 2 Eastern will be our live interactive meeting. But it will be a huge return on investment. And again, you can go to 6weekstoday.com/offer, or probably more effectively call Bob 720-256-0208. Bob, any last questions from anybody?
I know, sir. I think you covered them all.
No?
Uh,
Okay.
we talked about Marco. Yep, we got them all, sir.
Okay. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. We got to go to another meeting here in about a minute. But if you have any last question, feel free to jump in and ask, or any last comment, and then otherwise we're gone. Okay. I hope to see you guys next Wednesday. And again, 720-256-0208.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Bye-bye. Thank you, sir. Bye.